Okay, so here we are. This is the first lecture in Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is on international trade and finance. And I've got an article for you in today's Wall Street. It says, "Sheltering profit made abroad is no big feat." Talking about international trade, this article is about international trade, and the video I have to show you is on international trade. But the point that this article makes is that it says here, Standard & Poor's 500 companies, including Apple and Microsoft, put away a record $2.3 trillion of cumulative foreign earnings by the end of 2015. So that's $2.3 trillion that these corporations made in foreign countries that they did not bring back to America. Now, if they had brought that money back to America, it would have done a lot of good in terms of stimulating jobs. So why didn't they bring that money back to America? Because America is the only country in the world that taxes money that is made in foreign countries but brought back to America. Now, according to this article, and I didn't realize it worked this way, but according to this article, if a company makes a profit in a foreign country, it pays taxes to that foreign country. And the difference between the taxes it pays to that country and the taxes it would have owed to the U.S. or would owe to the U.S. government is how much that country will pay taxes on when that money is brought back to America. Does that make sense? Okay, American corporation makes a profit in a foreign country. It pays taxes to that foreign country. But if its American taxes would have been more, then the difference will have to be paid when that money is brought back to America. Now, no other country does this. See, every other country says, well, a corporation will pay taxes in the country that money is made, that profit is made. But America wants tax revenue on that, on at least a part of that money. So what do American corporations do? Well, they don't bring the money back to America. See, and what do they do instead? Well, with low interest rates, close to zero, why not borrow the money that you need to invest? Because you're not paying hardly any interest on it anyway. In other words, instead of bringing the money back to America and then paying a hefty tax on that money, it's better to leave the money in the foreign country and borrow the money at very low interest rates. Okay, so anyway, that's just something about how the world works. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Could you borrow the money from yourself? Could you borrow your own money in a foreign country?
I don't know. If you can you borrow your own money?
The tax laws?
I don't know. Yeah, it gets very complicated when you're messing with taxes and all. It can get very complicated. Now, this video I'm going to show you is on the Import-Export Bank, something that was brought into existence during the 1930s during Roosevelt's New Deal programs. And one point that the video makes is that there's really just what the Import-Export Bank is that it takes the government takes taxpayers' money and it gives that money to certain companies for the purpose of stimulating exports. But of course, anytime government's involved, you've got politics. So what happens with the Import-Export Bank is that those corporations that are favored more than others are the ones who get the money. In fact, there's just a handful of companies that get the vast majority of the money through the Import-Export Bank. And that's something that this video will discuss. So let's watch this. I think you'll find this interesting. Let's see. This, by the way, is from Wall Street Live. If you go to Wall Street Live, there are different programs, and I always go to the opinion one, the opinion program. I find that in terms of economics, that's the most relevant. And I watch this almost every day. This is Mary Kissel. She does an excellent job.
Playing out on Capitol Hill that you should be following. The Mercatus Center Senior Research Fellow Veronique de Rougy joins the show in studio for once here in New York. Welcome, Veronique.
Thanks for having me.
Senator Richard Shelby, he's chairman, I think, of the Banking Committee.
Yes.
He is refusing to consider the nomination of directors for the Export-Import Bank.
Yes.
Why?
The Export-Import Bank has a 5-member board, and it needs to have 3 active members before it can actually authorize any deals above $10 million. And right now, they only have 2 active board members. President Obama has sent a nominee. After withdrawing the Democratic nominees, he's actually sent a Republican nominee called Mark McWaters. And Shelby is saying, no, this is not a priority, plus I think it's a crony program, and I'm not going to consider pushing the nomination through.
Well, why would it be a problem for the bank not to be able to lend more than that $10 million? Does the Export-Import Bank do a lot of loans that are above that level?
Actually, this is, we've always said, you and I, when we've talked in the past, I mean, the Export-Import Bank is in the big business, right? It's like, and I had calculated, if you look at all the loans that they extended between all their activities between 2006 and 2014, which was when we had the bulk of the data, it was 84% of their activity is loans that are above 10 million. So it's huge. But what it means is that right now, what it's doing is just small business stuff, and the Democrats should be ecstatic, right? Because that's the reason they said we wanted the Export-Import Bank.
Of course, for viewers who don't know it, this is a 1930s era bank.
Yeah.
It's taxpayer backed, and as you say, a lot of its money goes to Fortune 500 companies like Boeing.
Boeing gets 40% of the activities benefit Boeing. 65% of the entire portfolio of the bank benefit 10 companies.
And yet, Republicans, though, decided to reauthorize this bank. So is Senator Shelby effectively standing up and saying, I'm with the reformers, you shouldn't have extended this bank? Is this an intra-Republican fight?
Well, it is an intra-Republican fight, but not on the Senate side. On the Senate side, a majority of the majority actually was against the Export-Import Bank. And Majority Leader Mitch McConnell from Kentucky is actually, who says he's against the Export-Import Bank, actually made a move that infuriated a lot of Republicans for a good reason back in August, which was to basically allow an XM amendment to be attached to the transportation bill, which was seen
which is how it got renewed.
It got renewed, and so it's more complicated on the House side. On the House side, actually, a majority, unfortunately, a teeny majority of Republicans were kind of were for it, which is really
so
disturbing.
Effectively. This nomination fight, do you expect it to be resolved anytime soon? And if it isn't, then does that mean that Republicans in the form of Senator Shelby have cut back on the ability of this bank to lend to its
Absolutely.
companies?
I mean, thanks to Senator Shelby, consistency on this issue and saying that he was against it and it wasn't his priority to reauthorize fully a crony program. Effectively, for a long time, we've actually cut back on the crony activities of the federal government.
Well, 3 cheers for Senator Shelby then. 2 thumbs up. The George Mason University's Senior Fellow Veronique de Rougy. Thanks for joining the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, God! Oh, it bit me! It bit me! Hang on. I know a medical website.
This is a good ad, by the way. Have you seen this ad?
No. Pop-up ad. I'm gonna make you sign up for the newsletter. Oh, that's great. No, I don't want to download your app. Hang on. 15 more seconds and I can skip this ad.
Oh, look. It's a bright white light.
13, 12, 11, 10.
Let's see. Sometimes the ads are better than the program. Let's see. View, let's see, slideshow from again. So, any questions about the video? Okay. Now, y'all know what, when they use the word crony, what that means, right? Crony means that decisions are made for political reasons. You know, those in power make decisions to benefit their friends. You know, the in-group. That, you know, that's what cronyism is. Yeah.
Same thing as like rent seeking then?
No, rent seeking is when a corporation gives money to politicians to try to influence legislation that will benefit them. Cronyism is just a blanket favoritism. You know, it's not necessarily, you know, specifically that money's changed hands, but it's just more of a blanket term than rent seeking is more specific. But it is related, for sure. But that's a great question. Anything else? All right, well, let's get to these slides then. So, why trade with other nations? All nations can increase productivity, lower prices, increase jobs, and standard of living. So, in other words, the United States is very large and we're very richly endowed with many natural resources. But could Americans live as well as we do if we did not trade with other nations? And the answer is no. I mean, could we survive if we didn't trade with other nations? Well, yeah, probably so. But we certainly, the average American, certainly could not live as high a standard of living that we now do because of international trade. And one reason is that the world's resources are not evenly distributed around the globe. That you know, even though the United States is large and again, you know, that we're richly endowed with many natural resources, we don't have everything that we want or need to in terms of resources. So we have to depend on other nations for certain resources, or it could be natural resources, or it could be things like difference of climate, or it could be wage differentials. I mean, you know, there's lots of reasons why we could benefit from other trading with other nations. And how does foreign trade affect gross domestic product? An increase in exports increases GDP. A decrease in exports decreases GDP. Now, gross domestic product, as you should know by now, is one way of measuring a nation's well-being, or measuring growth from time period to time period. The gross domestic product is a dollar value of all new and final goods and services produced in the nation in any one year. And when we export more than we import, then we have a net inflow of money. You know, more money comes in than goes out, and that increases GDP. Okay, it increases the wealth of a country. When we export more than we import, money comes in, Well, it's just like a family. More money is coming into the family, so the family's better off. The family's wealthier. Same with Americans. So if we, on the other hand, if we import more than we export, then money flows out of the country, and that's a decrease in gross domestic product. Now, what I'm going to show you later is that if you measure money coming in and into a country and money leaving a country, that there is an equilibrium, at least in a free market, there is an equilibrium at the point where the money leaving equals the amount of money entering. Now remember what the word equilibrium means. It doesn't mean two things are equal. It means a point toward which the economy tends. So I'm going to show you, in just a little bit, why there's a tendency for the amount of money leaving the country to equal the amount of money entering the country over a period of time. So this just is, economists love graphs. This is a shift in the economy's production possibilities frontier. And this simply shows us that with trade, we pushed out our production possibilities frontier. What's possible shifts outward when we trade with other nations. Now, what gives a country's currency value? Now, why do you want to possess American dollars? Because you can buy things with American dollars, right? Mm-hmm. Well, why do foreigners want to possess American dollars? So they can buy things from America. Okay? It's that simple. Now, if you show me a country that doesn't have anything that foreigners would want, then their currency would be worthless outside of that country. Why would one want to possess a country's currency if you could not do anything with that currency? If the country didn't have anything that you wanted to buy or need, or avail yourself of, like maybe banking, why possess that currency? And if there's no demand for that currency, then that currency would have no value outside of that country. So one reason why foreigners want to possess American dollars is that they can buy things from America. It's just like we can't go down to the corner store and buy something with euros or Japanese yen or Chinese yuan, right? We need American dollars. Well, same with foreigners. How can foreigners buy from America? Well, they need dollars. So what they do is that they exchange their currency for dollars in order to buy from America. And same with us. When we want to buy from Europe, we have to exchange dollars for euros to buy from Europe. If we want to buy from China, we exchange dollars for yuan to buy from China. If we want to buy from Japan, we exchange dollars for Japanese yen so we can buy from Japan, you see.
These are institutions, right? Not consumers like you or I.
Oh, it could be consumers. Could be, yeah. A very simple example is when you travel to a foreign country. Many countries don't accept American dollars, so when you get into a country, you have to exchange your dollars for that country's currency. Lisa?
That's when you go to Canada, you have to exchange your money to go into Canada. Do you want to buy anything?
From Canada, yeah. Yeah. So what gives it? Well, and now another thing though is, unlike other countries, there's an additional reason why foreigners want to possess American dollars, and that is that still at this point, the American dollar is the world standard currency. Now, because of the petrodollar system, that was when when America made arrangements with Saudi Arabia, saying that we'll give you military protection if you agree that you only accept payment for your oil with American dollars. And then other countries, oil-producing countries, did the same thing, and that's called the petrodollar system, and that helped make the American dollar the world standard currency. So now this is becoming less so every day that goes by, but it's still true to an extent that when a foreign country wants to buy from another country, it converts its currency to dollars, and then it buys from that other country. That's what it means when we say the American dollar is the world standard currency. It means that other countries accept the American dollar in terms of trade. So countries exchange their currency for dollars and then trade with other nations using dollars. So that's another reason why foreigners want to possess American dollars. See, they want to possess American dollars so they can buy things from America, but they also want to possess American dollars so they can buy from other nations. But that's only true. Well, no, let me take that back. It's not only true, but it's largely true for the dollar and not other currencies. Now, I hesitate there because the American dollar is falling from its perch as the world standard currency, that other nations are making bilateral agreements. China now trades with Japan with their own currencies. They don't use the American dollar. China has come out with an international currency that's backed up by gold, the yuan, and that's being used in terms instead of the American dollar. The American dollar is falling from its perch, and in a couple of years it may be just like any other currency. It won't be a standard currency. And what does this mean for Americans? Something to think about. See, a big reason why we Americans live as well as we do in terms of the things that we can afford to buy, especially from foreign countries, is the fact that the value of the American dollar is propped up because it's the world standard currency. But if it falls from that perch and it's no longer the standard currency, there'll be less demand for it. And with less demand, the value internationally will go down, so that when you and I want to buy foreign products, it's going to be more expensive. So our standard of living will greatly diminish. And especially if you consider the fact that so many American corporations have left America. We used to be a country where we actually produce things, and we still do to some extent, but not nearly as much as we used to, because of our regulations and high taxes, and perhaps other reasons. Many American corporations have gone, to foreign countries. So that's why so much of what we buy as Americans, if you go to the store and you look at clothes, for example, how many clothes are made in America? Or furniture, or almost anything. All these things are made, they could be made by American corporations, but they're made in foreign countries. So if the value of the dollar goes down, see, what I'm saying is that if so much of the things that we buy are from foreigners, or, like I say, it might be an American corporation, but the things are produced abroad, therefore they have to be imported, right? Does Apple, that's an American company, right? But do they manufacture anything in America? Nothing. Everything is produced in other countries. So if the value of the dollar goes down, what happens when we want to buy these things? The price is going to go up, which will lower our standard of living greatly in this case. An exchange rate, the price of one country's currency measured in terms of another country's currency. See, the values of countries' currencies is ultimately determined by the supply and demand of that currency. You increase the supply relative to the demand, the value will go down. If you decrease the supply or increase the demand for that country's currency relative to other currencies, the value will go up. Now, when you're talking about foreign currencies, and it's always relative to, okay? You know, what the value of the dollar is what it is relative to other currencies, okay? If other currencies become more valuable relative to the dollar, then our buying power goes down. Or if the American dollar becomes, it appreciates relative to other currencies, then our standard of living goes up. But it's always relative to. And what does it mean when a currency is depreciated? An increase in the number of units of a currency needed to purchase one unit of foreign exchange. Notice what that means is when a country's currency depreciates, that means it becomes less of less value relative to other currencies. Okay, that means means appreciation would be the opposite. It would mean that our currency is worth more relative to other currencies. What does it mean when appreciated? Okay, I just talked about that. And what determines exchange rates of different currencies? The supply and demand for that currency on the international market. Period. Supply and demand. You know, I was talking about supply and demand. I was talking to an Uber driver the other week, last week, and he was showing me how it works with the app, and evidently with Uber, you know, it's all based on demand and supply. That if there's a low demand relative to the supply of drivers, then you pay one rate when you want to ride. But if the demand increases in a certain area, location, if the demand increases for drivers relative to the number of drivers available, then your fare goes up by 50% and then another 50%. So it's like, you know, it's X and then 1.5X or 2X. But that varies all through the day and from day to day, depending upon supply and demand for the people who want rides relative to the number of drivers available.
Yeah, this weekend it was 4 times more in Blacksburg. 4 times?
Oh, so it's 4. See, I don't know much about it.
4 times more in Blacksburg this Saturday, starting at 8 a.m. and it went
cool.
till 3 in the morning.
So because the demand was so high relative to the number of drivers available over the football game.
Yeah, and then I know in Blacksburg at night, starting at 9:30 or 10, it goes up 2 times or something.
Because
so
of the
3 a.m. because of the bars.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right. People want rides.
Yeah.
Coming home from the bars.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's a perfect example of demand and supply. I mean, that is really good. So what are flexible exchange rates? Rates determined by the force of demand and supply without government intervention. See, right now, essentially the market, now what's the market? That's demand and supply. In this case, the demand and supply for a country's currency. And basically, I say basically because when we say that a country's currency floats, that means that that country's currency has its value because of the demand and supply for it on the international market. Now, there is something called a dirty float. And what a dirty float is that we say, okay, a country's currency is dependent upon supply and demand, but the authorities can influence the demand or the supply of that currency and thereby influence the value. That's called a dirty float, and that's really essentially what determines the value of almost every currency in the world is the demand and supply. But countries do have ways, which I'll explain a little bit. They do have ways to influence those market forces. Okay. Now, some countries actually peg their currency to another currency. Like China presently pegs their currency to the American dollar. So if the American dollar goes up in value 5%, the yuan goes up in value 5%. Now that's going to change, I think, here fairly shortly, but I believe it's still that way. But that some countries peg their currency. Usually these are smaller. I mean, China did this before it became such a large player on the world market economically. But now that it is a major player, I'm sure that this will change. Especially with the new Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. That's going to change things dramatically. Remember, this bank only has been in existence for, well, less than 2 weeks. And it's going to have major implications in all that we're talking about here in this chapter. And I have yet to find any information on this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank from an American source. Isn't that interesting? All the information I can find are foreign sources. RT.com has done some news on this bank, but RT, even though it's in English, it's a Russian program. What is it called when currencies are allowed to fluctuate? That's called floating. So I just got ahead of myself here. What determines demand for a currency in the international market? Foreigners demand another country's currency and what that currency can buy in that country. Okay, talked about that. So I do get ahead of myself here. What determines supply for currency in the international market? When citizens of a country buy goods and services from another country. In other words, if we buy more than we sell into other countries, then the supply of dollars increases on the world market. Or if we were to sell more than we buy, then there'd be a net inflow of dollars, and the American dollar would go down in supply on the world market. So just, you got to look at America as a sphere, and then the rest of the world around it. Of course, this would be true for any country. And so it's really what we're talking about is the relationship between us as a sphere, and our relationship to other countries. So what determines different exchange rates? Let's say that you were a foreigner, and either you were very wealthy, or you were in charge of some big fund. In other words, it's your responsibility to put a large sum of money where it's going to do the most good. It may be your own money, or it may be other people's money, by you being in charge of a retirement plan or something. So if you were a foreigner and it was your responsibility for a whole bunch of money, what are things you would consider of where you're going to put your money? Because you can put your money anywhere in the world. You don't have to keep it in the country that you live in. So you say, okay, now where is the best place that I can put my money? Well, these are the things that you would consider. first thing you consider are price levels. In other words, if you let's say you're a foreigner and then you put your money in an American bank, and the bank pays you, well, in today's world, let's say 2% interest. But in that same time period, let's say 2% over a year. But in that same time period, inflation in America is 4%. Well, if you were to take your money out of America, what's happened? Well, in nominal terms, you've made 2%, but in real terms, you see, you've lost 2%. Instead of gaining 2%, you lose 10%, because in real terms, when you took your money out, the value of the money you took out was 2% less than the money you put in. See what I mean? See, again, you put your money in America, you get 2% return, interest return, but inflation's 4%. So in real terms, you've lost 2% instead of gaining 2%. So when you're looking around the world, you say, oh, well, when I put my money in this country, what do I anticipate? Of course, it's always anticipation, right? I mean, what's past is past. The only thing pertinent is what's in the future. So you're going to put your money in a country that you anticipate is going to have a low level of inflation, or at least the interest that you can gain is going to be significantly more than the interest that you expect in that country. Okay? And the other thing, of course, is interest rates. Different countries pay different interest rates. So that's something else you're going to consider, of course. What kind of return are you going to make on your money? Today's market, it's very, very difficult because all countries in the world are on the same song page, and they're all we've all got low interest rates, and Europe's got negative interest rates, Japan's got negative interest rates, Holland has got negative interest rates. It's all, it's changing the game. But anyway, interest rate's something you want to consider. Rate of growth is another thing. You want to put your money in a country that is going to grow, because the possibilities are more positive in a country that's growing than a country that's declining. And of course, you want to put your money in a country where there's political and economic stability. You don't want to put your money in a country that may be on the verge of a political revolution and lose everything, or it's on the verge of a depression. You put your money in the bank, and then we got a depression. That bank goes out of business, and you lose all your money. See, so you want to put your money where there's lots of political and economic stability. Now, in the past, if you considered all these things, I say in the past, recent past, since World War II maybe, America was a good place to put your money. But if you look at these things, that's becoming less true compared to other countries. Our growth rate, for example, was less than other countries. And equilibrium in the world market, and this simply shows us, if a country's currency is determined by market forces, then what we're talking about here is the demand for currency, which is downward sloping, and supply of that currency, which is upward sloping. Now, why is it? It's easy to know why demand curves are downward sloping, right? Because if the price goes down, people want to buy more. If the price goes up, people want to buy less. But why are supply curves upward sloping? Why is it that when the price goes up, the quantity supply goes up? Because suppliers can make more money or be more profitable, can make are better off as the price goes up. So as the price goes up, the incentive to increase supply goes up. Okay, so remember, these are two different groups of people. Demand curves are those groups that's doing the demanding. Supply curves is that group that's doing the supplying. These are two completely different groups of people. See, who supplies? Like take savers for example. Well, who supplies money to banks? Savers. So when interest rates go up, savers have more incentive to put their money in interest-earning accounts, right? So the price of money goes up, which is interest. The price of money goes up. So savers have more incentive to put their money into savings, so the supply of money in this loanable funds market increases. And of course, if demand goes down relative to supply, then the value goes down. And this is what could happen if when I think I can use the word when the American dollar is no longer the world standard currency, then the demand for that dollar is going to go down, which would lower the price. And the demand for the Chinese yuan, for example, if it becomes the standard currency, will go up, and therefore the value will go up, which will mean that the average Chinese will live better and the average American will live less well. Now, the chances of another currency actually becoming the standard currency, I think, is remote. It would probably be a combination of currencies, or even I think it'd be a combination of currencies. I used to think it would be a special drawing right of the International Monetary Fund, but I'm not sure about that anymore. Okay, so of course, supply, this shows us that when supply goes down, the price goes up. I mean, this is just supply and demand here. All these things affect the values of currencies. And a dirty float, I've already explained, when we influence the supply and demand of a currency on the international market. We do have something called the International Monetary Fund, and different countries support that. And one thing a country can do is that, if America wants the demand for the dollar to go up on the world market to increase the value, it can go to the International Monetary Fund and borrow other currencies, not dollars, but other countries' currencies, and then take these currencies around the world and exchange them. Well, in this case, if they borrowed other currencies and they then exchanged those currencies for dollars, that would lower the supply of dollars on the world market and therefore lower the value. Or if we wanted to increase the value, we could do the opposite. We could borrow dollars and then buy up other currencies and pay back our loan with those other currencies. So countries can use the International Monetary Fund to borrow money one way or the other, and then use that money to influence the value of their currencies on the world market. Now remember, does the country want the value of its currency to be high or low? Well, see, you got winners and you got losers in this. If a country's currency is high, then what does that mean in terms of consumers? Well, that means consumers, it's favorable to consumers, right? If the value of the dollar was high relative to other currencies, then we Americans could buy from foreigners. We could buy a lot from foreigners. I mean, our standard of living would be high, right? But who are the losers? If the value of the dollar goes up, who are the losers? Well, the losers are corporations, American corporations, businesses, right? Because if the value of the dollar goes up and we buy more from other nations, and the price, essentially the price of foreign products goes down, then what happens to American producers? Well, they get less business, right? So, as money, plus, as we buy from other nations, more money leaves, and that's less money at home that's going to benefit American businesses. So, now, if you take growth, if you look at over the long term and you consider growth, then a high value currency is bad, a low value currency is good. Because with a high value currency, more money leaves, more money leaves, more money leaves, more money leaves the country, right? And then, what happens to our growth over time? It diminishes. But if the value of our currency goes down, then what happens to foreigners' buying power when they want to buy from us? It goes up. So foreigners buy more, money flows in, money flows in, money flows in. So over time, what happens to our growth? It increases. So a low value currency is good for long-term growth. A high value currency is bad for long-term growth. That's why many countries actually, in order to stimulate their country and to encourage more money to come in, they will take steps to devalue their currency. See, if they can devalue their currency, then and one way of doing this is through interest rates. If interest rates go up, all this is always relative to other countries. But when interest rates go up, what's that going to do? Well, that's like if American interest rates go up, then foreigners will demand more dollars so they can put those dollars in American banks, so the value of the dollar goes up. But if interest rates go down, there's less incentive for foreigners to demand dollars because they can't get favorable interest rates in America. So the value of the dollar, the value of the dollar goes down. And with a low value dollar, again, that's good for long-term growth. So interest rates countries with monetary authorities in different countries will affect a change in interest rates in order to stimulate growth. And usually that's to lower interest rates. If you lower interest rates, then people will demand less of your currency and the value will go down. This is one reason why Europe actually has negative interest rates. They're trying to stimulate their economies through interest rates, through monetary authorities. Nowhere in the world does the market control interest rates. It's all controlled by monetary authorities. It's not a free market. And so what Europe is doing is that they're actually driving interest rates into negative territory, trying to stimulate their economies. Which is an example, by the way, of how all these countries are relying on monetary policies instead of making hard choices in terms of fiscal policies. I mean, they're taking the easy way out, but it's not working. Japan's been doing it for over 10 years, and it's not done. Things have only gotten worse in Japan. They've tried to, lower the value of the yen for 10 years, and now, of course, Japan's got negative interest rates, but the economy is still stagnant. But they'll do that instead of making hard choices and changing their tax structure or their regulations, to stimulate growth. Politically, it would be difficult. Politically, in democracies, it's difficult to change your regulations and change your tax structure in order to increase growth. So politically, it's easier not to do that and simply try to rely on monetary policies. But it's not working. It's not working. I mean, you can't, it's nonsensical. But Japan's been doing it for over 10 years. They still haven't learned their lesson. So what is a managed float? An exchange rate system that combines features of a freely flexible rates with intervention from central banks. That's, a dirty float or a managed float system, where basically the market determines values of currencies, but we influence those market forces. That's a managed float system. And what we have today is a managed float system. And what is the balance of trade? The measure of money that enters and leaves a country via trade with other nations. And I think what is the favorable balance of trade? The value of a country's imports of goods is less than the value of its exports. So in other words, a favorable balance of trade means, we buy and we sell, to other countries. If more money comes in than leaves, that's a favorable balance of trade or a trade surplus. If more money goes out than comes in, then we say that's an unfavorable balance of trade, or sometimes we call it a trade deficit. It's either in surplus, more money comes in, or deficit, more money goes out. But the balance of trade is only a part of the total money flowing in or out of a country, because there's something called the balance of payments. Now, the balance of trade is not the balance of payments. Balance of trade is a part of the balance of payments, but not the whole thing. See, can money leave a country or enter a country in ways other than trade? Well, sure. If American corporations invest in foreign countries, then that's money out. But that's not trade. Or if foreigners travel here and spend money, that's money in, but that's not trade. Or if we travel in foreign countries and we spend money, that's money out, but that's not trade. So, or if foreigners put money in an American bank, that's money in, but that's not trade. Or if we put money in foreign countries, like savings and banks, well, that's money leaving, but that's not trade. See what I mean? So money can leave a country or enter a country in lots of ways other than trade. So the balance of payments is a measure of the total amount of money either entering the country or leaving the country. The balance of trade only measures the money leaving or entering via trade, imports and exports. And so really what we're talking about here in terms of inflation, in terms of value of a country's currency going up or down, is the balance of payments, and not just the balance of trade. And I think I'm going to show you next why there's an equilibrium where the amount of money leaving equals the amount of money entering. I think, let's see, I'll follow these PowerPoints. Unfavorable balance of trade, more money, leaving and entering via trade. How can money leave other than trade, investments, travel, sending gifts? Can the balance of payments offset the balance of trade? Yeah, can we have a negative balance of trade or a trade deficit and yet have a positive balance of payments or a payment surplus? Well, yeah, more money can leave a country via trade, but even more money can enter a country in these other alternative ways. So we could have a positive balance of payments even though we have a negative balance of trade or a trade deficit. So again, that's ultimately it's the balance of payments that matters, and not simply the balance of trade. See, balance of payments summarizes all economic transactions that occur during a given time period between residents of that country and residents of other countries. See, total amount of money leaving or entering. And the payment surplus means more money is coming in than going out. Payments deficit, more money is going out than coming in. When can a payment surplus be a problem? Now you might think, well, with more money coming in than going out over a period of time, that should be a good thing. But really, it could result in inflation. Now, basically, what causes inflation? The increase in money supply relative to the increase in goods and services. Of course, we know it's more than that, right? We got this equation of exchange, so really M times V divided by Q equals P, or prices. So there's actually three variables that determine the price level. You know, money, velocity, and the quantity of money determine the value of money. So what can but not considering all, velocity and all that, if more money comes in and goes out over a period of time, that could cause inflation. You've got too much money chasing too few goods. That, again, that's a great gross simplification. And the opposite's true. If more money leaves than enters, then we could have unemployment. See, when there's more money leaving the country than there's entering the country, we have a payments deficit. When can a payments deficit be a problem? Well, that can cause unemployment. See, a too favorable balance of payments over time can cause inflation, but a too unfavorable balance of payments over a period of time can cause unemployment. So, and this is where I explain, and what point is equilibrium reached? When the amount of money entering equals the amount of money leaving. Now, this is just demand and supply. If you understand demand and supply, you can just explain so many things. Let's suppose that we have a problem of too much money leaving a country. Now, why can that be a problem? Because if it's severe over a period of time, it could cause unemployment. Okay, with more money leaving, let's say I'm the country and you all are in other countries in the world. All right, dollars is leaving me, a lot of dollars over a period of time is leaving me and entering into the world market. Now, what's happened to the supply of dollars on the world market? It's gone up. When the supply goes up, what's going to happen to its value? With demand and supply, what's going to happen to its value? It's going to go down. When the value goes down, what happens to your buying power when you want to buy from America? It goes up, right? If the value of the dollar goes down, that means the value of your currencies have gone up. It's just the opposite side of the same coin, correct? So if the value of your currencies goes up relative to the value of the dollar, then American products are less expensive to you. You buy more from America, right? So more money flows in. Meanwhile, Americans, my buying power goes down, so I buy less from you, right? So if I buy less from you and you buy more from me, what happens to this problem that we used to have of too much money leaving? Well, it's reversed. Now more money starts to come in and less money starts to go out. Now let's take it the other way. Let's suppose that we have too much money coming in over a period of time. Now remember, that could cause inflation, but what's going to happen? Well, when dollars leaves you and comes back to me in America, the supply of dollars goes down in the world market, the value goes up. So what happens to your buying power when you want to buy from me? Well, it goes down, so you buy less from me. Meanwhile, my buying power goes up when I want to buy from you, so I buy more from you. If I buy more from you and you buy less from me, what happens to this problem that we used to have of too much money coming in? It's reversed. So see, that's why we say that over a period of time, the amount of money leaving the country equals the amount of money entering the country. At least that's the equilibrium. Now remember, equilibrium is a concept that doesn't mean two things are equal. What it means is that equilibrium is a tendency toward. Over a period of time, in a free market, now remember, we can influence the market here, but in a free market, the amount of money leaving the country tends toward the amount of money entering the country. So over a long period of time, a country would never have a severe problem of a balance surplus or a balance deficit, because the market would take care of that automatically. See, but what we do is, even though markets would adjust for these things over time, politicians are so often impatient. They got an election coming up shortly, and sure, the market will take care of it, but meanwhile, the election may come and go, so, let's do something now to kind of speed things up. And so that's what we do. We're always trying to influence the system, even though if we did not influence it, over time, everything would just work out fine. Now, there's a lot to be said there. If you could carry over that analogy to a lot of situations, it would explain a lot. And what happens is that politicians, in their eagerness to influence events, oftentimes make things worse over time. They prevent the system from self-adjusting, which can cause big problems. How are balance of payments resolved? Okay, and this is in what I just explained. With a lot more money entering over time, currency appreciates in value. With a lot more money leaving over a period of time, currency will depreciate in value. And then you just follow that line of reasoning. And this is another thing. And remember, this is one area where you cannot rely on your memory. Okay, in cases like this, your memory is your worst enemy. You've got to just see the logic in it. You've got to follow through, the cause and effect. You've got to understand it, and it's basically just demand and supply. But you've got to understand it, and then follow the line of reasoning, because it's just logical. But if you try to cram it into your brain, it's not going to do you any good, and you just get confused anyway. So just see the logic in this. The economics is. In fact, there's a best-selling book out there for this course called the Microeconomics, the Science of Common Sense. Because really, a lot of economics is just common sense. That's all. It's just common sense. Why is there a balance? And this is what I just explained. The value of a country's currency fluctuates as supply fluctuates on the world market. Now, what is the gold standard? I'm trying to get done with get to the point where we talk about international trade for next time. The gold standard, an arrangement whereby the currencies of most countries are convertible into gold at a fixed rate. When was the gold standard? From 1879 to 1914. The international financial system operated under a gold standard, where currencies were actually backed up by gold, and currencies used gold to validate, exchanges between countries. And one advantage of the gold standard, any increase in money supply would be limited to a country's gold holdings. See, one big advantage of the gold standard is that, could we increase the money supply willy-nilly on the gold standard? No. In order to increase the money supply, we'd have to increase our gold holdings. But with a fiat system, what countries have today, that's not backed up by anything, that gives countries the authority to increase the money supply willy-nilly. Yeah.
Couldn't you print more money and just have your money buy less gold?
Well, a gold standard, like, for example, in Bretton Woods, 1944, America said that it would take $35 to buy an ounce of gold, period.
But that was a set?
Yeah, a set. That's what a gold standard is. It sets
Okay.
the value of a country's currency relative to gold.
So you couldn't just change that?
No.
Okay.
Well, it depends on the system. Like, even with that system that we formulated in 1944, there were ways that we could slightly influence that rate of exchange. But basically, it was, the gold standard, see, between 1944 and 1970, up thereabouts, we were on a relatively fixed international exchange rate system, and each country pegged their currency to gold. Like America said, well, it would take $35 per ounce of gold, and England said it takes so many pounds about an ounce of gold. The Germans said it takes so many marks about an ounce of gold. And by countries pegging their currencies to gold, and they actually did, at least governments, use gold in exchange if they wanted. Each country knew the value of each other's currency. So in other words, if we peg the dollar to gold and England pegs the pound to gold, I'm using pound because this is before the euro, then we know, just a minute, let me turn from my train of thought, then we know what the value of the dollar's worth relative to the English pound. Now, the 1970s comes along when we get inflation. But not only did we get inflation, but different countries have different inflation rates. Like America's got a 10% inflation rate. England's got a 16% inflation rate. Germany's got a 4% inflation rate. Now these are actual figures, by the way. So if America has a 10% inflation rate and Germany has a 4% inflation rate, then the value of the dollar in actuality goes down by 10%. The value of the German mark goes down by 4%. So the values now have changed 6% relative to one another, and yet how can we trade assuming that the values are fixed relative to one another? And we can't. See, the system became unworkable during the 70s because different countries had different inflation rates. And so what we did in the 70s is that we said, in 1974 I think it was, that we said, well, this system's not working because it's not consistent with reality, and the only thing we can do is just not try to fix them at all, just let the market determine values. And that's what we did during the 70s, and that's what we do basically today. Now, you had a question? Who had a question?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Oh, you can't remember it. I'm sorry. Well, I had to follow my train of thought, otherwise I'd lose it.
So how does the price of gold today influence our economy?
Well, the price gold's got nothing to do with our currency today. There's no tie-in. I mean, the gold is just like, coal or iron ore or any other silver, or it's just another metal. That's all. There's no relationship with anymore. Because yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
Um,
I'll remember.
With the inflation rate changing from country to country, if there's like a fixed international standard.
Yeah, which there was
Yeah.
from 1944 to
It's
1970.
still the inflation rates fluctuating.
Well, yeah, because inflation is not tied to the value of a currency. I mean, it's the other way around. The value of the currency doesn't determine. If you try to fix the value of a currency, world forces determine the value of the currency, not any authority that dictates it. And when the authority dictates it in a way that's inconsistent with reality, it doesn't work. And that's what happened in the 70s. Now, we've talked about this before, but here, I touched briefly on the gold standard. Why is Bitcoin or other virtual currencies similar to the gold standard? And why is it a superior system than the one we have?
Because it's regulated.
Yeah, it's regulated. In what way, though?
There's limits how much.
Yes, exactly right. See, with our money now, being it's a fiat currency, authorities can increase it as we have through quantitative easing. About $80 billion a month for years and years. We can increase it as much as we want. But with Bitcoin, now with the gold standard, we couldn't do that, right? Because we would have to increase our gold holdings in order to increase the money supply. But with Bitcoin and other virtual currencies, they can only come into existence through a prescribed way, and only a certain amount can come into existence over a certain time period. And therefore, the authorities cannot just increase the supply of Bitcoin willy-nilly, and therefore the value is more certain. See, and that's why more and more companies all the time are accepting. Well, Bitcoin is becoming the most popular virtual currency. There are other virtual currencies, but many banks now have. Who was it here that showed me? I don't think he's here, but one of you all showed me. He had an account at his a military bank, bank that dealt with service people, and there was actually on that website there was actually a link for Bitcoin. I mean, they dealt more and more banks now are offering services using Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is definitely increasing acceptance, and the big reason is that it's a more solid system, more stable system than our fiat currency. And it's similar to the gold standard, because what was the advantage of the gold standard? We could not increase the money supply willy-nilly under the gold standard. With Bitcoin, it's the same thing. We can't increase the supply of Bitcoin willy-nilly, and that's the relationship, the similarity between virtual currencies and the gold standard.
Can't there be like an objective standard where, like, there's no national allegiance?
Well, there is no national allegiance with these virtual currencies.
Like, yeah, but I'm, like with a dollar, like that's the interest there is for America.
Yeah, and that's why I think, whatever becomes the standard currency, the world standard currency, will either be a virtual currency or it'll be a combination of currencies. It doesn't have to be, a one currency. It could be a combination of the Japanese yuan and the Russian ruble, which is, I think, pretty good possibility.
I'm wondering if that would like hurt interest rates internationally among nations.
Well, yeah, it would affect interest rates if you let the market. Now, remember, we can talk about the market and we can talk about these automatic adjustments, but our money system and banking system is not a free market. It's strictly controlled by central authorities. And what I'm saying is that when those central authorities make decisions that is contrary to market forces, when there's competition between market forces and authorities, market forces will win 100% of the time. Okay? We cannot thwart the market over a period of time. Period. We can't do it. We can make short-term adjustments, and we may fool ourselves to thinking that we've really made a change, but it becomes our policies. If our policies are inconsistent with reality, eventually reality raises its ugly head, and we find out quickly that we're not top dog. The market is. Well, that's a good way to end this lecture. Give you food for thought. Anyway, we'll continue this next time.